Yeah, we were the first ones that, started to allow private equity investments. We did it um, because of valuations. I mean, as the valuations go up, it just gets harder and harder to build cap tables. Our experience with the private equity firms that have been involved in our business has been unalliedly positive. They're passive investors. They've been good partners in the clubs that they've been in, and I continue to believe that, with the right limitations and the right rules surrounding, information and whatnot, that it's a positive for the sport and for franchise values as a whole.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of SBJ's On Stage. I'm your host, Taylor Bloom. This week's episode features Rob Manfred, Commissioner of Major League Baseball, in a wide-ranging interview with SBJ senior writer Joe Lemire. This was recorded on April 22nd, 2025 at the CAA World Congress of Sports, presented by Sports Business Journal. Since then, Manfred has been in the headlines for his ongoing labor discussions with players and signs of progress toward a new national media rights deal. But this conversation remains just as valuable today. It's a candid, wide-ranging look at his priorities for the league, from labor relations and media strategy to global growth and on-field innovation. If you want the big picture context behind the news, this is it. Let's go on stage.
We have a saying in my business that all news is local. So here we are in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm sure a lot of folks are wondering about the expansion process, and where are you in that?
Oh, good. Let's get right to it. So look, I have been consistent about the idea that baseball should be looking to expand. There are several markets in the United States that are big enough to support a Major League Baseball team that want baseball. I think we should try to meet that demand. I also think it's an opportunity for the sport in terms of schedule format. 32 is a good number. 4-team divisions better than 5s. It works a lot better for us. And that's an important consideration in baseball because we play so many games. I'm committed to the idea. I'd like to be in a position where we've picked teams before I'm done. Try to fill those 2 additional slots.
Sure. All right, let's go down the highway a little bit. We've got Bristol, Tennessee coming up, and we've got a big game there, perhaps the expected largest crowd ever. What went into planning that game, and what should everyone expect?
Bristol's part of a growth effort that we've undertaken over the last few years. The concept is take the game someplace where it's not usually played, not played every day. It works best if you have some sort of an affinity theme. So, Field of Dreams in Iowa, Rickwood in Alabama, Fort Bragg in North Carolina, Williamsport in Pennsylvania. And we thought Tennessee, great baseball culture. Tennessee Volunteers reigning NCAA champions. Vanderbilt's always had an amazing baseball program. And, there is a overlap, I think, between NASCAR fans and our fan base. And so it seemed like a natural. And the idea of having a huge crowd, I think we've sold 50,000 seats already, really appealing to us. So we're looking forward to Bristol. We think it's going to be a great event.
Yeah, I remember we spoke last year about the Rickwood game, which was a great success. And so many of these, as you say, when there's an affinity, a narrative, that sort of really helps. How do you balance, maybe using that to your advantage, doing more often, or obviously then you have, home gates that you're taking away. There's a balancing act, but how many of these could you have?
Look, right now, we kind of focused on 2 a year. The only one that we have repeated so far, and we've done it several times, is Williamsport. We think that the play with the little leaguers is invaluable to us. It's important to our youth development efforts. So we keep doing that every year. And then one other one that's something fresh or different. I'm not saying we're never going back one of the places we've been, but we like to have a new idea in there. So a couple of years seems about right for us.
Mm-hmm. This spring training was the first time ABS was used at the Major League, for spring training games. How did you feel like that experiment went? What was the feedback you got from players and umpires?
Um, we feel like the experiment was a great success. I mean, I think most important, and it is sort of where we start on all these issues, it was really popular with fans. I think fans like the idea of trying to get particularly high leverage, important calls right. There's an entertainment aspect to the technology itself, the renderings and how quick it is. People seemed excited about it. So we see it as a success. The umpires have agreed to move forward with it, which is the most important thing. And in general, my feedback from players have been really good. Now, we did take instruction out of the player meetings. Every year I meet with each of the individual teams. And last year when we were out there, we asked them explicitly, do you like the challenge system or do you like the system where every pitch gets called? Interestingly, they overwhelmingly favored the challenge system. So we did gild the lily on the test a little bit. We knew sort of what they thought about the two choices going in.
Sure. And certainly makes sense to, work your way toward potentially an everyday system as well.
Look, I think it's important to think about the concept behind replay generally. We accepted when we first went to the instant replay system that you're not going to get every call right. That's an aspiration that no matter how much you do, whatever, the real goal for us has always been in the high leverage situations when it really matters to have an outlet where you can get a bad call corrected. And we see the challenge system in that same vein. It's not every pitch, but if in fact in a really important situation, one gets missed, you got a chance to get it right.
Yeah, no, I have long thought that fans' primary concern about umpiring officiating is they don't want their team to lose on a bad call. So getting that in place.
And that's the leverage play, right?
Sure. And I know that in Korea, the KBO introduced it full league-wide last year, and they've made a few tweaks. Is that something that you've tracked at all? Because I know...
Yeah, we have a nice back and forth with KBO and NPB on these rule issues. Not every one of the three does everything in exactly the same order. The Japanese less interested, for example, in the pitch clock because their fans seem to like longer games, which good for them. That's a good thing. But yeah, we pay a lot of attention to those sorts of experiments, how they've worked. They were very satisfied with the way it played out in Korea, and we take that as encouraging as well.
Sure. And that's certainly been not only just coordinating with the other league officials, but that was a market you went to Korea last year, and then certainly everyone saw, based on the ratings, I think everyone saw how well everything went in Japan. What was your takeaway from that experience?
Yeah, Japan was phenomenal. We have invested over a long period of time, things like the WBC openers in Japan, an effort to get more Japanese players to come here and play. And I think those efforts bore a lot of fruit during this trip. You couldn't go anywhere in Tokyo without seeing Ohtani's face. I mean, it was unbelievable. You go 3 blocks, it's another picture of Shohei, which is great. Games sold like crazy, huge television audiences, 24 million people for each of the 2 games. And just a great event, real buzz in the city. Couldn't be happier with the way it turned out.
Sure. And then, while we're thinking internationally and globally, certainly everyone in the sports business and all businesses are keeping an eye on economic indicators, potential tariffs. How is Major League Baseball approaching this?
Look, we think of ourselves as an entertainment product. Entertainment products fall in that large category of discretionary spends. And so we pay a lot of attention to the economy. It does, the idea of a recession, not good for our business, obviously. But so far, our attendance has really held up. We had the biggest Friday night last week since 2007. We're up a couple of ticks off last year, which was a great year for us attendance-wise. So we're holding our own so far and also holding our breath, I guess.
Yeah, so aren't we all? A question just came in, and I encourage all of you to, I'll try to get to them as they come. Softball is a top 5 sport for girls in high school, and the College World Series games have more than 2 million viewers. And I'll even now, we just heard Commissioner Silver talking about obviously they have the WNBA product. What does MLB think about softball?
Yeah, we're going to have news about an investment in that space at the professional level in the not too distant future. But softball's been a huge part of our youth development programs. Every place that we're doing baseball, we try to do softball alongside it. The biggest determinant of fandom is, did the kid play as a young person? And it's really important in women's sports because when they are often the deciders in households as to how money gets spent. So really focused on softball, and interestingly have found some significant traction in women's baseball. The idea of exactly the same sport, I do think there's something to that. So we're really interested in all of those aspects of women's sport.
Sure. There was certainly a bit of news earlier this spring about ESPN, opting out of its media package. What progress have you made to find a suitor? Is it a possibility that ESPN comes back? Do you split it up?
Look, that package involves 3 great assets, really. I mean, the wild card round, the playoffs, the home run derby, and, really our only truly exclusive window on Sunday night. Because those assets are great, we have had tremendous incoming interest with respect to the package. A number of bidders that'll be interested in excuse me, the whole thing. But, whether it gets split or not, that remains to be seen. I think the most important thing from our perspective is that the interest level has been such that the next deal is going to be a step forward for baseball in terms of reach, in terms of developing new partners that are going to be important for us in 28. And, we're looking forward to sorting the next 3 years out in fairly short order.
No leagues are completely apples to apples comparisons, but certainly everyone saw what the NBA was able to do. Are there anything that you can take away from that deal, or how are you starting to map out? I'm sure those conversations are well underway.
Yeah, look, I think the NBA and Commissioner Silver in particular did an unbelievable job in a really difficult environment. I think the biggest single thing, and we did pay a lot of attention to what they're doing, is, the idea of having essentially all your rights available and then cutting up packages that are as appealing as possible to the various broadcast partners. Important for us to try to emulate. I think local in particular is a huge opportunity for us. When you accumulate our local audiences, and we take those cumulated numbers to market in 2028, there's going to be real interest in that product. Most of our local markets, we're the highest rated programming all summer long. And if you can get yourself into a format where you can accumulate those viewing audiences, you really have something that will be of great value.
Mm-hmm. There was a report recently that maybe MLB TV could even be licensed to others. We have all these, whether it's the Amazon Prime, the Netflix, we have Apple, we have a lot of big streamers that are involved. Is this something that you would consider building your own? Would you work with a partner?
Well, I think that MLB.TV being available out there, it's part of our effort to make sure that we're in the best position vis-a-vis the media buyers as possible. It's a great asset in the sense that you got large number of subscribers that are very sticky. They renew year to year. It can be an appealing part of a package going forward. Longer term, I like the idea of finding a partner on the digital side that becomes the home for baseball. I think one of the things that we have struggled with, and some of it of our own doing, is we ask our fans to find games a lot of different places. I think if we could get into a situation where we have a broader, bigger national footprint, and that's easy access in terms of broadcast or the like. And then a digital product, which is where the rest of baseball can be found. I think it would be a little more fan friendly than where we are today.
Mm-hmm. And as far as getting everyone, your job, of course, is the ultimate coalition builder. I imagine trying to get every club involved on this is a bit of a challenge.
Well, look, always a challenge when you talk about change. I mean, change is hard to pull off, no matter what kind of change it is. But we've had a pretty good track record in that regard. And I think the current situation, particularly in local media, creates an opportunity. Usually when you have, we're challenged in the local markets right now because of the decline of the RSNs. When you have a challenge, there's usually an opportunity, and we think we have a way to take advantage of that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. A number of questions have come in on a similar topic, probably one that you were expecting anyway, about competitive balance and payroll spending from large markets to small markets. So we do have this, you do have this collective bargaining agreement coming up. Is that something, is the CBA the best way to remedy that, or how else can you approach?
Really probably the only way, but I think it's important to talk about the different aspects of competitive balance. We go out in the fall, and I'm sure we're going to do it right before the playoffs start because we kind of do it every year. And we talk about the fact that we have competitive balance in the sense that we haven't had a lot of repeat winners, and there's been a lot of variety in terms of teams that make the playoffs and teams that ultimately win the World Series. And that's important. That's really important. But the other aspect of competitive balance, which is, I think, the one that is of concern to our fans, and again, we try to stay focused on that fan idea, is, in the wintertime, when you're in a market where it's a smaller market, resources are more limited, your team's doing nothing, and you see other teams kind of loading up on what everybody perceives to be great players, there becomes a perception that there is a lack of balance, a lack of competitive balance, a lack of fairness. And that perception, whether it's borne out in terms of the results on the field ultimately, is really important to our business because we need to sell season tickets during that exact same window. And that perception can be very damaging. I think that, over the last couple of years, we have heard more and more from fans. The theme becomes, you've done a lot to make the game better on the field, but in X, Y, or Z market, we feel like we don't have a fair chance. And that's a problem because at the end of the day, we sell competition.
Yeah, and I think there's a big difference whether there's certainly been teams that have gone through rebuilding processes, but as long as there's a clear strategy in place, there's excitement around these young prospects and seeing them develop, whereas there are a couple examples out there where maybe there's less hope.
Yeah, I think that I would say this. I do think that if you go through a rebuild and it kind of works out, let me use the word promptly, within a reasonable period of time, that can generate a lot of excitement. I think where things go awry and, rebuilding is in an exact science and the rebuild takes longer, that is very damaging to the business. And, trying to get into a situation where we minimize those kind of rebuilds, I think would be a positive for us.
Mm-hmm. How would you assess how the games in Tampa and Sacramento, historically minor league ballparks have gone to this point?
Let me take Sacramento first. I went out before the season to see the ballpark. They had a big luncheon. I think 500 people showed up. A lot of enthusiasm in Sacramento. They see themselves, back to question number one, as an expansion candidate, and rightfully so. They've done a really nice job, investment by the River Cats, the minor league team, and the A's to make the ballpark experience as good as possible. They're up about 66% in terms of ticket sales off where the A's were in Oakland. So that's been really positive. But obviously, the long-term play there, Las Vegas is going to get built and they're going to be in Vegas. So that it's really a temporary play. Tampa, more difficult, just because of the timing and the uncertainty. Hats off to Hal Steinbrenner and the Yankees. They had a renovation program at Steinbrenner Field that was, I think it was a little more than $30 million they were spending. And not only did they spend the money, do the renovations, but the first people that got to use those renovations were the Rays. It's kind of like buying a new car and giving it to your teenager first,
Are the Rays going to wreck it?
Who knows, right? But all kidding aside, I do think it was very generous of Hal in particular to do. I think it will be an interesting experience. I've been very committed to the idea of Tampa Bay, but there's two sides to Tampa Bay. The idea of playing some games on the Tampa side, seeing how that going, is important. And I do think the renovations has made it as good as possible for the year, at least that they're going to use it. I don't see it going beyond this year, but at least for this year. And so far, kind of, I don't know if that's wood or not. Knock on wood. The weather's been pretty good.
Sure.
So we feel good about the start they've made in Tampa.
Yeah. And of course, the repairs to Tropicana Field are scheduled. What any update on that? And then obviously more pressingly, I'm sure a lot of folks want to know what did the Rays do long term?
Yeah. We remain optimistic that the Trop will be ready for 26. So the way the lease worked there is when you lose a year, being 2025, it extends a year. So they're going to be there through 28. So we're anxious to get those repairs done and get them back in their real home in a major league ballpark. I remain of the view that there is an outcome that keeps baseball in Tampa Bay. I think the Tampa Bay region's a major league market, and we're going to do everything humanly possible to try to find a long-term solution there.
Mm-hmm. Which league's fan experience do you find aspirational and why?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I mean, it's sort of hard to not answer that question, the NFL. I mean, given they are such a juggernaut and it's a great business. I do think that the appointment kind of viewing that the NFL attracts on Sunday afternoons is an unbelievable asset for that sport. On the one hand, on the other hand, we're never going to have that. It's 162 as opposed to 18. I mean, it's just a different product, right? I think the NBA and Adam have done a phenomenal job in terms of engaging with other parts of our culture around the sport. It's something we work really hard at, and I think it's an important part of building fandom, particularly with younger generations.
Mm-hmm. There are also a few questions here. Would you ever institute a minimum, salary floor as well as a salary cap, and how are those conversations?
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that often is misunderstood. People talk about the mechanism that is used by the other four, including soccer, major professional sports. I mean, it involves a commitment to the players that you're going to pay them a certain percentage of revenue. And the way that you ensure that you pay that percentage is you have a floor and a cap. Everybody's got to be in that range. Otherwise, you have no idea whether you're going to actually. So, by definition, what people call a salary cap involves a cap and a floor. I think if there was, our owners haven't decided where we're going to be after the 26th season when the collective bargaining agreement expires. Despite that fact, the one thing that I am absolutely comfortable saying is if you're ever going to make a salary cap proposal, it's going to have a cap and a floor.
Okay, sure. When it comes to ownership, I know the process in Minnesota has probably gone on longer than most people expected. Any idea as to why that might be? I know they're a franchise where the league is producing their local media rights. I'm sure that's probably at least part of it, not having that certainty.
Look, I don't think Minnesota or any of the clubs that are using MLB media have any more uncertainty than a lot of our SN clubs. And a matter of fact, they may have more in the sense that they know we're not going anywhere as opposed to an RSN partner. So I don't think that's a significant factor. I really think that that sale was going along nicely. There was a lead bidder who was very public about the fact that they were the lead bidder, and that lead bidder turned to another baseball team to make a deal. That made the process go a little slower. There are a number of really quality groups interested in Minnesota, and I'm confident they're going to get a sale at a good number in fairly short order.
Mm-hmm. So it turns out torpedo bats weren't the answer to everything.
Right.
How do you think about the idea of innovating even on like the most basic tools? I mean,
I think that, first of all, when you hold a torpedo bat, if I gave you what people call a torpedo bat and gave you another bat, about half the people would be able to tell you which is which. It is not as dramatic as, it's kind of made out to be, number one. Number two, there's a huge trade-off with a torpedo bat. There is a larger sweet spot, and if you actually are talented enough that you think that that's where you hit it, you do get a little better performance. The problem is when you're off the sweet spot, you pay a price in terms of what you get. Number three, probably the best piece, I hate to be a homer, but the best piece on this, Kevin Millar did a piece right after the weekend where this all started, where he held up a bat that he used in 2004, where he had moved the sweet spot around. This is not new. I mean, this has been going on a long time. I think within the contours of our rules, and we do have, rules regulating bats, that trying to find a way to be a little bit better is kind of what competition is about, always within the rules.
Mm-hmm. With team valuations increasing and capital structures getting more complex, how do you think about the role of private equity in MLB?
Yeah, we were the first ones that, started to allow private equity investments. We did it because of valuations. It as the valuations go up, it just gets harder and harder to build cap tables. Our experience with the private equity firms that have been involved in our business has been unalliedly positive. They're passive investors. They've been good partners in the clubs that they've been in, and I continue to believe that, with the right limitations and the right rules surrounding, information and whatnot, that it's a positive for the sport and for franchise values as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Last week, one of the great annual traditions, we had Jackie Robinson Day. Certainly in today's political climate, some of those initiatives are being, discouraged. How do you look at, DEI and social responsibility in 2025?
Look, I think the headline for me is, our values have not changed. We want our player complement, our front offices, and our fan base to be reflective of the makeup of our country. And we're going to continue to pursue that goal in all three of those groups. Yeah. I think it's always something that we pay attention to is evolution that goes on with respect to the legal landscape. And we do manage in an effort to avoid any government intervention. It rarely, the old phrase, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. But, to the extent that you can stay off that radar, I think it's a really good thing.
Mm-hmm. Earlier we heard from the Vanderbilt athletic director, and we've talked a bit about college and NIL. There's been a trend in baseball to draft a lot more college players. Is it something that's on your radar to consider how the NCAA college baseball is developing?
Yeah. We think college baseball has become and will continue to become increasingly important to us. It puts us in a position where we draft players much closer to them coming to the big leagues. They get drafted with a level of familiarity in the fan bases that is really important for us. because it generates excitement. We're getting the best pitcher from, we were talking about Vanderbilt. That's an exciting thing for fans, and they actually show up in the Major League ballpark a lot quicker. So we're interested in working with college baseball to continue that trend towards more and more college players.
Mm-hmm. Well, the pitch clock has been one of the great inventions in baseball. The speaker clock here, however, has come up red, saving you. But everyone, round of applause for Commissioner Manfred.
Thanks for listening to this episode of On Stage. If you found value in this conversation with Commissioner Manfred, subscribe, leave us a review, and share with colleagues who follow the business of baseball. Here's a thought starter to bring back to your team. In a sport that's both steeped in tradition and ripe for change, how do you decide which innovations to push forward and which traditions to protect? I'd love to hear your perspective. Email me at tbloom@sportsbusinessjournal.com. We'll be back next week with another exclusive conversation from a leader shaping the future of sports business. Until next time, stay tuned and stay ahead. This is On Stage.